After 21 years, my boss fired me without warning. So I took his biggest client. My name is Daniel Harris. I'm 52. For 21 years I helped build that company. The systems, the clients, the reputation. They called me irreplaceable. They promised loyalty, respect, partnership. But when it suited them, they fired me with a smile and a severance check. No warning, no thanks. They thought I would walk away quietly. They forgot that I wasn't just an employee. I was the foundation they were standing on. This is the story of how I took back everything they thought they owned. When they called me into that conference room, I knew something was off. 21 years with the company, and not once had I been summoned without some kind of heads up. No email, no text, no "can you swing by for a quick chat?" Just a terse meeting invite from HR at the end of a normal Thursday. I walked down the hall, past glass offices I had helped design, past coworkers I had trained, past awards I had won for the company. None of it seemed to matter now. I could feel it in the air, that electric buzz when decisions have already been made behind closed doors and the only thing left is to make you nod and sign and disappear. There were 3 people waiting for me when I stepped inside. My direct manager, a woman from HR I barely knew, and Mr. Andrew Keller, the CEO himself, a man I had personally helped pull out of a financial collapse 10 years ago. He didn't even look up when I entered, just stared at a folder on the table like it was the most interesting thing in the world. "Daniel," the HR woman said with a forced smile, "we appreciate you taking the time. This isn't easy for anyone." I almost laughed at that. Not easy for anyone. I had given this place my prime years, missed birthdays, anniversaries, my son's championship game. I had poured every ounce of myself into this company because I believed that loyalty still meant something. Apparently I was wrong. They used a lot of words: downsizing, restructuring, changing directions. I tuned most of it out. The important part was simple. I was terminated effective immediately. My severance would be generous, they said. They hoped I could move forward positively. They wished me the best of luck in my future endeavors. I didn't speak, didn't ask questions, didn't beg. I signed the paperwork with steady hands, stood up and thanked them for the opportunity. The HR woman looked relieved. Mr. Keller never looked up. On the way out I passed by the company plaque near the lobby, the one listing founding contributors on a polished brass plate. My name was still there, 3rd from the top. I ran my finger across it once, like closing the cover on a book I hadn't realized was finished. They thought they had ended my story that day. What they didn't realize was, I wasn't leaving empty-handed. And I wasn't leaving quietly. The next few days were strange. Waking up without an alarm. No urgent emails to answer. No fires to put out by 9 a.m. It should have felt like freedom. It didn't. It felt like walking out of a burning building, still smelling the smoke on your clothes long after the fire was out. I stayed quiet. I didn't post anything online. I didn't call any of my old coworkers. I let them wonder. Let them gossip about what had happened behind the scenes. Keller probably thought I'd sulk for a few weeks. Maybe send out some desperate resumes, maybe even leave the industry altogether. People like him never expect the ones they burn to come back smarter, stronger, hungry, because they don't understand what loyalty really breeds underneath all the scars. It breeds memory. And I remembered everything. The years I stayed late to fix client problems because leadership was too busy playing golf. The deals I closed when the sales team said they were impossible. The handshakes. The contracts. The trust I had built personally with some of our biggest, oldest clients. Trust they had in me. Not the company's logo. Not Mr. Keller's handshake. Me. I still had those relationships. Still had those conversations tucked away in my phone. Still had those handwritten thank you notes and Christmas cards from clients who had said year after year, "We stay because of you, Daniel." They had no idea the seeds they had planted. Seeds Keller and his board had foolishly tried to rip out with a single meeting. Over the weekend, I drove out to the old family cabin 2 hours from the city. No cell service, no distractions, and sat at the dusty kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, making lists. Not of grievances, not of people to blame, lists of opportunities, of names, of relationships that didn't end when my badge was revoked. They thought they fired an employee, but what they actually fired was the architect of their success, and I had no intention of letting them keep what I had built. By Monday morning I had a plan. Not revenge, not exactly. Something cleaner, sharper, smarter. First I scheduled a series of quiet meetings, breakfast coffees, private lunches. No fanfare. I reached out to 5 of our biggest clients, the ones I had personally managed for the last decade. I didn't pitch anything. I didn't badmouth Keller or the company. I simply told them the truth. After 21 years, I was no longer with the firm. And then I sat back and watched their reaction. Shock, concern, anger. Every single one of them asked the same question. Where are you going next? And that's when I knew I didn't have to steal anything. Loyalty, once earned the right way, can't be stolen. It follows you. One client, a major tech company whose contracts alone made up almost 18% of the firm's yearly revenue, leaned across the table and said quietly, "Wherever you land, Daniel, we'll land with you." I didn't have an office yet, didn't have a logo, didn't even have a name for my new venture. But what I did have was the one thing Keller never understood: trust that lived beyond the paycheck. That afternoon, I filed the paperwork to start my own consulting firm. Quietly, no press releases, no flashy LinkedIn announcements, just a small LLC registered under my name, an attorney to set up the protections I would need, and a vision that stretched far beyond what Keller could ever imagine. I didn't chase clients. I didn't send desperate emails begging for contracts. I simply let word spread. And spread it did faster than I could have hoped. Within a month, 3 of our biggest accounts had called my personal cell, not the company line they had been forced to use before, and asked if I was taking on new business. I smiled every time. Said the same thing to each one. I'd be honored to keep working with you. Let's make sure it's on the right terms this time. And just like that, without raising my voice, without breaking a single rule, I had pulled the foundation right out from under Keller's empire. And he didn't even know it yet. It wasn't long before the ripple effects started hitting Keller's doorstep. At first it was just small things. A delayed project here, a sudden quietness from a key client there. The kind of shifts that someone like Keller, too high up, too arrogant, would dismiss as coincidence. But I knew better. I knew how much weight each of those relationships carried. I knew which accounts kept the lights on, which ones could make or break the quarterly earnings reports Keller cared so much about. I had built that web myself over 2 decades, thread by careful thread, and now, all I had to do was step back and watch it start to unravel. I didn't even have to lift a finger. Clients started pulling back, reassessing their partnerships, as they put it. A few sent formal termination notices. Most simply stopped renewing contracts, letting them expire quietly into nothingness. And every time a contract ended, it wasn't just revenue Keller was losing. It was credibility, stability, reputation. Still, I said nothing. I posted nothing. I didn't brag or gloat or hint at what I was doing. Silence had become my deadliest weapon. The tipping point came faster than I expected. One of the firm's cornerstone clients, a client Keller had bragged about for years as being locked in for life, scheduled a final exit meeting. Not with Keller. Not with the new guy they had promoted into my old role. With me. At my tiny, one-room rented office downtown. When they walked in, they didn't even bother with small talk. The CEO, a hard-nosed, sharp-eyed woman named Carla, whom I had spent years building trust with, shook my hand and said, "We're moving everything to you, Daniel. I don't trust them without you there. Send us the paperwork." I nodded, masking the wave of satisfaction threatening to crack my calm. She paused, gave a small smirk, and added, "You deserve better than the way they treated you." That night, as I locked up my tiny office and sat alone under the flickering streetlight outside, I allowed myself a small, private smile, not out of pettiness, not even out of victory, out of gratitude. Because somehow, despite everything they had thrown at me, the betrayal, the erasure, the casual dismissal, I hadn't lost who I was. They had fired a man they thought was replaceable. Instead, they had freed the one person they never could replace, the architect of their own success. And now, I was building something new, brick by brick, on ground they could no longer touch. Within 3 months, the cracks Keller had ignored became chasms he couldn't cross. The firm's quarterly numbers tanked, not just lower than projections, but catastrophic. Long-term clients who had once anchored their cash flow were gone. Key partnerships dried up. Even new prospects, sensing the shift in momentum, backed away. In the business world, perception is everything, and without the relationships I had spent years cultivating, their image of invincibility crumbled fast. I didn't celebrate. I didn't throw parties or send taunting emails. True victory, I realized, isn't loud. It's watching your enemies destroy themselves with the weapons they handed you. It wasn't just about the clients either. It was about trust. Word spread faster than any marketing campaign ever could. Keller's arrogance, his cold treatment of the people who built his success became an open secret in our industry. Other firms heard the rumors, the mass client exodus, the internal panic. Keller's name, once a badge of prestige, turned radioactive overnight. One morning I sat across from an old friend at a diner, a mid-level executive who still worked at my former company. He stirred his coffee slowly, looking both ways before leaning in and whispering, "They're talking layoffs, Daniel. Huge cuts. Maybe even a merger." I just nodded and listened. I didn't gloat. Didn't need to. He looked at me carefully. "Everyone knows what happened. They know why this is happening." I shrugged. "It was never about revenge," I said quietly. "I just didn't want to spend the rest of my life building empires for people who didn't deserve them." He chuckled under his breath, a mix of admiration and disbelief. "You're a legend now, you know that?" Legend. The word didn't taste like victory. It tasted like survival. I didn't set out to become a symbol or a cautionary tale. All I wanted was to rebuild, cleanly, honestly, on ground that wouldn't shift under my feet the moment I turned my back. Now I had it. A growing roster of clients who respected me for who I was, not just what I could produce. A business built on trust, not fear. A quiet life where every success felt earned, not extracted at the cost of my soul. And best of all, Keller's empire was crumbling. Not because I attacked it. Because the very foundation they neglected, loyalty, honor, trust, had finally, inevitably collapsed under its own weight. A few weeks later, the final blow came quietly, without ceremony, fitting really considering how they had tried to erase me without a second thought. I got a call from another former colleague, someone who had kept me quietly updated throughout the whole collapse. His voice was tight with disbelief. "Keller stepped down," he said, "officially retiring. Effective immediately." I didn't ask why. I already knew. The board had probably forced it. The shareholders needed someone to blame. Someone to sacrifice on the altar of lost profits and ruined reputations. And Keller, the man who once thought he was untouchable, had been stripped of everything he had built. Not with fire, not with rage, but with silence. With absence. With a quiet, relentless shifting of loyalty he had been too arrogant to see happening. I didn't feel giddy. Didn't feel vindictive. I felt clean. There was a certain peace in knowing that the best revenge isn't about their suffering. It's about your freedom. That afternoon, I took Ranger, the scrappy old Labrador I had rescued a few months back, for a long walk through the woods behind my new house. A modest place on a few acres. Nothing flashy, but everything I needed. No traffic noise. No urgent late-night emails. No missed family dinners because of quarterly targets. Just the crisp smell of pine. The crunch of dry leaves underfoot. The rhythmic panting of a dog finally at home. I paused at the crest of a hill, looking down at the river winding through the valley below. Everything I had built before, the long hours, the missed memories, the blind loyalty. It was gone now. And somehow, I didn't miss it. Not even a little. Some things you lose because life is cruel. Other things you walk away from because you finally understand your own worth. Keller taught me that lesson, not by leading, but by failing me. And standing there surrounded by open skies and second chances, I realized he had given me something he never intended: freedom. In the months that followed, I watched from a distance as the old company tried to recover. New management, new slogans, new desperate attempts to rebuild what had been lost. But it was like watching someone patch a sinking ship with duct tape. The damage wasn't just financial, it was foundational. The loyalty had bled out. The reputation had fractured. The trust was gone, and no amount of marketing spin could glue it back together. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even satisfied. I had simply moved beyond them, like stepping out of a crumbling building just before it collapsed into dust. My consulting firm grew faster than I ever imagined. Word of mouth spread like wildfire. Old clients recommended me to their partners. Those partners introduced me to entire new industries I'd never even considered before. What started as a survival move, a lifeboat in a storm, became something stronger, sturdier. A real business, built on relationships, built on integrity. Not flashy, not corporate, but real. I hired 2 young professionals who reminded me of myself at their age. Hungry, loyal, eager to build something with meaning. I paid them well, treated them with the respect I had once craved and rarely received. Because now I knew better. Empires built on fear crumble. Empires built on loyalty last. At night, Sometimes I would sit out on the back porch with a beer in one hand and Ranger's head resting against my knee, listening to the wind in the trees, the river humming in the distance. No corporate meetings. No quarterly review anxiety. No pretending that loyalty was a one-way street. Just quiet. Just peace. Just a life I built with my own hands. My own heart. On ground no one else could take from me. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I didn't feel expendable. I felt free. About a year after it all happened, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a plain white envelope with my name written in careful shaky handwriting. I opened it slowly, half expecting some leftover debris from my old life. Inside was a simple, short note. It was from one of the partners at my former company, a man who had once sat beside Keller in board meetings, nodding along, pretending loyalty while the ship sank beneath them. The letter said simply, "We made a mistake. We see that now. If you ever consider coming back, we'd be honored to have you." I stared at the page for a long time. Not angry. Not triumphant. Just finished. Because the truth was, I had already moved so far beyond that world that the idea of returning felt like stepping back into a burning building. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Some victories aren't loud. They don't come with trophies or applause. They come with silence. They come with peace. Peace earned not through retaliation, but through the strength to let go. I folded the letter neatly, tucked it into a drawer and went back outside, where Ranger was chasing squirrels through the fallen leaves. The sun was setting over the hills, casting everything in gold and fire. The man who had once begged for a seat at Keller's table didn't exist anymore. The man who stood here now didn't need their table. He had built his own. Stronger, wiser, freer. And no one, not Keller, not the board, not anyone could ever take that away again.